back, everybody, to our third week of our deep dive into Isaiah 49, a really kind of important passage for Equippers Church in West London. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at this remarkable piece of scripture. I think that one of the things we've noticed so far is that there is an awful lot to unpack and to uncover in this incredible piece of scripture. And in order to help us do that, Pastor Steve is joining us once again. And what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at Isaiah 49 verses 8 through to 18. And you might want to pause again, take a look at it, read it through in your group, and maybe even just stop for a moment and discuss what can you see in this passage? What themes can you see appear? We've certainly spotted a few things that we think are well worth talking about. So Pastor Steve, Isaiah 49, kicking us off from verse 8 over to 18. Where should we go with this one?
Oh, man. I think, we talked about there's these different servant songs, and you just see themes that keep coming up throughout them all. And I think one of the things that stands out for me is this idea, end of verse 8, you're here to restore the land, reassign its desolate inheritance. And if you can listen and hear the allusions to other verses, to say to the captives, come out, to those in darkness, be free. And it's this idea, this incredible time of liberation, of salvation, of freedom is there. We already had this back in Isaiah 42. Open the eyes that are blind, free captives from prison, release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. Isaiah 61, he has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim freedom for the captives, darkness for the prisoners. It's not surprising, we talked about this whole thing sits within Isaiah 40 on about comfort, good news, God is here. Yeah. And I guess that's a hard thing for people to... If you don't understand, it's like when God turns up, wonderful things happen, beautiful things happen, people get free. Yeah. And so this whole section really is, man, God is turning up just to do wonderful things in people's lives. It's like when God manifests himself, shows himself in West London, it's like there's this explosion of freedom, life, liberty, salvation. In fact, our passage starts with that in verse 8. In the time of my favor and in the day of salvation. This is a time when God is in favor and in salvation. Whenever he touches someone's life, freedom happens. Yeah.
And I think what's amazing about that is we've kind of talked about before, this is a sense of a promise of God. It's a sense of this is Jesus speaking, but also this is a sense of this, we can look at this and understand what this means for us today. And I guess in one sense, reading this means we can have a confidence in who God is and what he wants to do, right? Maybe we can unpack that a little bit. Like for me, this passage really speaks a lot about that idea of restoration or salvation, and then on to restoration. Like God's a God who wants to save, who loves to save, and so that's what he's aiming to do, right? That's what he's trying to accomplish.
And I think a guy, A.W. Tozer, said this. The most important thing about someone is what they understand about what God's like, and like your whole understanding of life, of London, of church, is completely different once you go, God is a God who touches people's life to bring wholeness, to bring healing, to bring freedom. Kind of everything changes. It's why, we said the concept of good news comes from Isaiah 40. We got great news for you. God is an incredible God who desires to do good things in people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, I think what this passage shows us a lot is that sense of really what we can have an expectation for. I think we should have an expectation for captives to be free, for people to be blessed or provided for. I love in verse 10, they'll neither hunger nor thirst. The desert heat or the sun won't beat down on them. Like there's protection there, isn't there? But then I love as well verse 13, and in a way, like, this has got to be a sound of who, and it probably is a sound of why we do things. Shout for joy, you heavens, rejoice, you earth, burst into song, you mountains. Like the heavens and the earth can't help but sing for joy about how good God is because of what's promised in this passage.
Yeah, again, it's these themes right throughout all these songs about joy instead of mourning in Isaiah 61, praise. And it's a great thought for, West London that, man, if people come into our world, they're going to find freedom, they're going to find life, they're going to find joy, this confidence. Like if I can get my friend in the room, they're going to have a wonderful encounter with God.
Absolutely. it's interesting then, because we then jump into verses 14 and 15, and we see this kind of, but Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me, the Lord's forgotten me. And then the response, can a mother forget the baby at her breast and has no compassion on the child? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. Do you want to speak into kind of what's going on even in that little section there?
Oh, yeah, I think it's a bit like we talked about last week, that idea that there might be seasons where it feels like things haven't worked, and the season when you feel like, man, is God there? And God's like, could a mother forget its child? Like, and it says the key thing of compassion, when God looks at your life, when God looks at West London, he's moved by compassion. In fact, actually the next verse, see, I've engraved you on the palms of my hands, like everyone's name written there, like these people matter to me. You know, sometimes see people have lost a child or something, they'll get the name tattooed on their arm or something, and it's like, that's kind of the thought, like, man, God is really, if you like, emotionally committed to this. Like he feels this. And he really wants to come in compassion. It's not just like, oh, I'll touch people and like my little party trick set people free. It's like he feels the pain of people and he's burdened by it, and he wants to come and see people set free from that. Yeah,
absolutely. And then I love the way, and we can talk about the next generation maybe this time or next time as well. But when we get to verse 18, lift up your eyes and look around, all your children gather and come to you, as surely as I will live. And I think what I like this next line, we talked about like his compassion for people, but also the way in which he values people so much. You will wear them all as ornaments. You'll put them on like a bride. Like there's a beauty, isn't there, in how God sees people, and in, you know, what this salvation can look like. Like you look your best on your wedding day, right? And I kind of love the way that this passage alludes to
and
that
very
as well.
Emotional. Look, I said, you know, week 1, Isaiah wants to grab your imagination. This is God like a mother and God like a bride. It's like, it's very emotional, kind of like God is committed to this thing and God's involved in this thing. It's not like, oh, we're trying to twist his arm to do something. It's like, if we could feel the weight of his heart for what he wants to do, you know, it's just extraordinary.
How do you think for the people of Israel, hearing this kind of thing proclaimed, like what do you think that would have been like for them, like to hear these incredible promises released? Like,
well, I think they needed to constantly be reminded that, well, two things: to be reminded that God is a God of compassion. Jonah discovered that, and he learnt that from Moses when Moses asked to see the glory of God, and God declared his name. I'm a gracious and compassionate God. But I think probably one of the lessons, you know, they saw this as, oh, set us free from, you know, these foreign oppressors, set us free from exile. And when Jesus came, he's like, man, I want to set you free from sin and death and hopelessness. And like these promises were so much bigger than they imagined.
And I guess that's probably what we need to hear from reading this now, is actually it's those kind of promises, right? That now, as we look at this, how do we understand what we're reading here?
It wasn't just like, oh, you're in, you know, the original context, you're in exile in Babylon, but it's all right, I'm going to set you free and bring you home. It's like, no, I'm setting you free from much deeper things and bringing you to a real wholeness and purpose.
And I guess our challenge now, we kind of talked last week or the week before about having that kind of mandate of being that light to the Gentiles or that light to the nations. This is what we're sharing, right?
And I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to finish on actually coming back to verse 8 where God says this, I will keep you and I will make you to be a covenant for the people. And again, you know, how do we know God's committed to us? Look at Jesus on the cross. Here's the radical thing. How do we know that God's committed to West London? Because there's a church there. That's a sign. You know, covenants had a sign.
Absolutely.
How do you know that God's committed? Because he's planted a group of people in that community to be his instrument and his channel to see this happen. How do we know God hasn't forgotten about West London? Because you guys are there.
Yeah, great. we talked last week, didn't we, about having a purpose and being formed for a purpose. Well, I think today what we've discovered is what that purpose is all about. It's about connecting people to that salvation, to that restoration that God has. There is so many wonderful promises about what salvation, about what discovering God looks like. And I love the fact that as a church, we have got the privilege of being involved in helping people find that, discover that, and really find God. What an incredible thing to be part of. Enjoy your discussion tonight. We'll be back for one final instalment of Isaiah 49 next week. So have a brilliant evening and we'll see you then.